בוקר טוב. אני לא הספקתי לשתות את הכמה כוסות קפה שלי, אבל התחלתי עם הראשונה אחרי טיול בקור. אצלנו חורף. ואני כרגיל אוהבת לשמוע אם יש איזה שהם הברקות בעולם. אז החלטתי אה, שיש משהו מאוד חשוב לכלל הציבור, ואפילו שאלה שלקחו את מה שלקחו, או שממשיכים ללכת לכל מיני מקומות, עוברים ניתוחים, מחתימים אותם על הסכמים שונים שהם לא יודעים, הם מאמינים שהם עוברים ניתוח, אבל הם לא מבינים את המשמעות של הנושא, וייתכן שגם הרבה מהרופאים לא בדיוק יודעים כשמישהו בא להרדים או מישהו מזריק איזשהו חומר, מה נמצא בתוך אותם אה, חיסונים. אבל זה משהו שהוא ענק, חשוב לכל אחד ממי שעבר בשנים האחרונות. אה, בטוח שיש אחד מהקרובים או בסביבה שנפגע והשתנה מוחית בהתנהלות, בהתנהגות, הגיע למצבים שאבחנו אותו סכיזופרניה, או שנאלץ, או הוכרח, או בכפייה, ללכת לאותם מקומות אשפוז נוראים, שבסופו של דבר אותם האחראים שם במחנות האלה, שהם קוראים להם טיפולים, פשוט מוחקים את זהותם של אותם אנשים שמגיעים לשם. המקומות האלה צריכים להיסגר, אותם אנשים צריכים להחליף את התלבושות שלהם לאנשים אמיתיים, לא לרובוטים שממלאים הוראות של פרוטוקולים, ולשנות את שיטת הטיפול. יש כאן דוקומנט, אני מביאה חלקים, אבל אני אשים את הלינק לוידאו המלא כי הוא באנגלית, ורציתי שזה יגיע לכמה שיותר כדי שיוכלו לשים, בקיצור רציתי לשים את התרגום בעברית למטרה שיגיע לכלל האנשים, להבין למה המון אנשים אה, לא, הם לא מי שהם, והם לא מתפקדים כפי שהם היו אמורים לתפקד. אין להם יכולת חשיבה, יש שליטה מוחלטת, ונכון שכל מי שניסיתי להסביר, וגם למקורבים ביותר, הם לא מסוגלים להבחין, הם לא מסוגלים לשמוע. הם מחשיבים אנשים שמדברים, כמו שפה, אני לא אראה לכם את הקטעים של מה שנקרא whistleblower, אלה שחשפו דברים, מיד דואגים להעלים, להסתיר, וכיוון שאותה אוכלוסייה היא פגועה, היא גם לא מבינה שהיא צריכה לחפש ולמה ומה לא בסדר. הצד שנמצא או מכיר את אותה אישיות חושב שהבן אדם איבד את זה, ואנחנו נראה כמה דוגמאות כאן בווידאו. זה סוג שונה, אבל אני חושבת שזה אחד הווידאוים. אני הפסקתי לראות כל מה שקשור לנושא אה, בנוגע לחיסונים, כי מזמן, ב-2021, זה די הספיק לי, האינפורמציה שנתנו בכירים מאוד, שאחד מהם כמובן יושב על כלום בבית סוהר, אה, שהוא היה אחד הגדולים והתותחים שחשף המון המבריקים. אדם שכל אחד מאיתנו היה יכול להיות ולשבת במקום שהוא נמצא היום. גרמניה הפכה להיות הזוועתית מבחינה משפטית בכל הנושא הזה. אני לא אומרת שישראל לא, ישראל כבר הכל בתי המשפט הם רומים, הם לא שייכים לאנשים חיים, הם שייכים לאלה שמזכירים את התעודות, שאלה שלוקחים את התעודות מאותו תאגיד, ומאמינים שזה הם בתעודה, ואחר כך שמים להם דברים בגוף כדי שבכלל לא יוכלו לערער על מה שנעשה. לכן חשוב מאוד לנסות להציל את האנשים, במיוחד אם למישהו יש במשפחה. יש אפשרויות, ואני מבקשת שתקשיבו למי שרוצה, אני אשאיר את הלינק המלא לסרטון, כדי שאולי תוכלו להציל חלק מהאנשים שאתם מכירים. אז שיהיה לנו יום נפלא.
These are not biological. As you go through the patent in section 219, it explains how they are self-assembled nanoparticles, and they're fully programmable.
From a technical perspective, if I can retrieve data, I can send data.
DARPA calls it transhumanism.
For semiconductor materials or semiconductors in these people, which ultimately led to surgical removal of biosensors. One of my earliest cases is the Bonnie Kellerby case.
This man and this woman here are now my family. And without John supporting Bonnie through this, remember, he thought she was crazy. But we were able to show proof on this journey that she wasn't. Okay?
We did.
And think about their relationship. This can happen to any one of you. Okay? And how would you feel if you let the love of your life go because someone synthetically induced mental illness? Thank you. Okay. You want to say anything? No. You want to say anything?
I just, this started 22 years ago for us. She was implanted 22 years ago. So that was very difficult. No. And it was very difficult. The 7 years before we met Jesse was hell, basically, because I didn't trust what she was saying, didn't trust what she was acting. Take her to the hospital. They put her in 72-hour lockup because they say that, oh, schizophrenia. That's what they use against you. It's not fair. It's a horrible thing. And we're lucky we made it through it today. So anyway, we got 3 inserts. We went through everything. I take her to wherever it's necessary to get help. And we've got some surgical removal. She's got 2 implants still that are very bad, that aren't released yet. We're hoping that this new doctor will help us to get it out. And then maybe we can have our life come back. But our life has not been normal. We should be enjoying our retirement, but it's very difficult to do that when she's tortured 24/7 with voice and torment. It's a horrible thing. It's unbelievable, actually. So anyway, sorry, very emotional. Jesse, thank you.
They removed 3 biosensors out of her. And I asked this question to everyone out there. How many of you out there have someone in your family, a friend, or know someone who has mental illness? And what if that mental illness was synthetically induced? Okay. How would you feel if this was done to a loved one, to you? Or to a close friend? And the Bonnie Kellerby case really touches home on that. I was invited down in Santa Monica, California to do a presentation in front of Secretary of State's RFK support group. They raised a lot of money for his campaign. And they asked me to do a presentation about this topic. And to my surprise, the Kellerby showed up there. And so we showed and demonstrated these biosensors that were taken out of her. And she stood up, and Mr. Kellerby was a very proud man, stood up, and he expresses he almost lost the love of his life because he thought she was crazy. In fact, Dr. Call called me and said, Jesse, can you please give this couple a call? I know that Bonnie's telling the truth. Can you please talk to him? And I said, sure. So I gave him a call. And when we held our first meeting in Sacramento, California, when I was just trying to find out how many victims are truly out there, and I expected a handful. And when we disseminated it out to the community, I had 100 people show up. Mr. Kellerby was there. And everyone in that room was standing room only, had the very same complaints with very little deviation. And Mr. Kellerby stood up and he said, I almost lost the love of my life, but I can no longer discard her as being crazy because each and every one of you have expressed the same complaints as her. And he goes at that RFK presentation that I was at, and he said, we should be enjoying in retirement. You know, they're making individuals like my wife look like they're crazy and diagnosing them with schizophrenia, force institutionalizing them, force medicating them, and further re-victimizing them. Bonnie Kellerby never consented for those biosensors to be implanted in her body. Those were done non-consensually. And what may surprise you, if I asked you, is this legal to do in the United States? And I would come back and say, right now, it is currently absolutely legal to do to you without your consent. In 2016, President Obama instituted the
סליחה שאני עוצרת, אבל מדובר פה על 2016 עם אובמה. התוכנית התחילה ב-2015, כאשר הם תכננו את כל הצצנה הזאת של New World Order. הם הכינו בכל המערכות, אבל בעיקר בנושא הרפואי, שהם שינו את שהם שינו סליחה, זה שעות בוקר, מתחילים הטלפונים. הם שינו את כל הנושא של קונסנט, של אישור מהחולה, מהפציינט, לתת הסכמה מלאה ברגע שהם מטפלים בו. וכמובן, הכל נעשה, כשאנחנו נמצאים בתחום שיפוט ימי, הכל נעשה דרך הסכמים וחוזים. ולכן, גם אם אתם פשוט מאמינים לאותו רופא שמגיש לכם את אותה, ודרך אגב, לרופא יש סמכות יותר מאשר שופט שיושב שם כקנוי או כפקיד בתוך מערכת של בית המשפט. וזה גם כן חשוב לדעת מאוד על הנושא של מה זה אומר רופא. בקטע הזה, ברגע שהוא מחתים והבן אדם שהוא במצב קשה וצריך מפחד ממה שעלול לקרות אם הוא לא יעשה את הניתוח, הוא חייב לחתום. ואז הוא חותם על משהו מזעזע ביותר שאין לו מושג, שה-NSA, ה-CIA, כל החבורות האלה יחד עם כמובן ביידן, זה ביידן, אובמה, הם כולם היו תחת מה שנקרא US Corporation, ולכן הם ביצעו את כל הדברים כמאפיה אחת שלמה נגד האוכלוסייה, וביצעו בהם ניסויים, שבכלל האנשים לא היו מודעים לזה. אז בבקשה.
the 21st Century Cures Act. And it was sold to the American citizens as a way to fight the opioid epidemic and crisis that we were having here in the United States. But hidden in it was a section called 3024. And in section 3024, the exact language is this: it is legal to experiment on US citizens without their consent as long as it does not exceed minimal risk criteria. Then the question is, what is minimal risk criteria? Nothing that doesn't happen in normal everyday life. And I would ask this: does death happen in normal everyday life? And they're further protected. If you are in an IRB and if you do a FOIA request to see if you are in an experiment, it is protected under national security protocol, so that data cannot be shared with you. And in 2024, the Biden administration extended it to cover private entities, private research institutions, and universities.
So I'm sorry. If you go in for like a doctor's visit or someone's going to give you a shot, because Obama instituted this, they could inject you with something you don't even know about?
Absolutely, it's perfectly legal to do. And you might be surprised. Yes. I had a software engineer. Yeah, I have a software engineer who took his children to a dentist recently. And under the authorization, there is a section in there that their data will be shared with the federal government, law enforcement, NSA, and research institutions. Why does that need to be included? I thought it was absurd. I didn't believe him. Then I had another client who said, the NSA is collecting our data. I had to sign this. And they will allow me to show you redacted aspects of their signed forms. And it absolutely says that your data will be shared with the NSA. So why is this being done?
I'm sorry, like, I know that you live in this world, so this is probably normal to you, but take the kids to the dentist, you're just filling out your forms, your intake forms, just going to the dentist. You don't realize that the NSA, and this is not every dentist, but in certain situations, I guess, that your information, your child might be injected with something and the NSA is going to be watching it and you have no recourse.
It is absolutely legal if you're a US citizen currently to experiment on this without consent. This is why we're out here educating the population. We have a URL called stop3024.com, and we're asking for everyone to sign that. We would expect we'd have 1 million signatures by now, but we don't. But the reality is that this is happening right now before our very eyes. And we can go deep down the rabbit hole about what this technology does. Back in 1994, November of 1994, there was a 21st Century Cures Act. It was a declassified document that was obtained through a FOIA request. And on page 80, this is to keep the United States Air Force a superpower 50 years into the future. On page 89 is a chapter called Biological Processes of this report. And in it, it talks about using RF technology to remotely influence the human body, affecting our biochemistry, our thought processes. And in it, it says with this tech that they can erase memory sets and imprint memory sets. That means that they can take a copy of someone's memory sets that has a certain attribute that they want to institute in others, so they can imprint it in others with this tech. And they can erase memory sets. Now, people say, well, that sounds very sci-fi, but it's in there. You can read it. It's in black and white. Go back to 1972 in California. Our correctional institutions are notorious for experimenting on prisoners. We have another document from our United States Congress Senate that talks about modifying human behavior. And in 1972 at Vacaville Prison, not only then were they able to remotely monitor your biometrics, that means your respirations, your heart rate, your temperature, your blood pressure, but in the section, it also says remotely read your thoughts. So that was in 1972. Now, in 2013, there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ido Bachelet who gave a TED Med talk in Israel. And he's holding up a syringe. He says, I just brought this syringe from my lab, and just at the tip, not the full scale of the syringe. He says, at the tip of this needle was 1,000 billion robots. Nanorobots is what he was talking about. They're 50 nanometers in size. That's 2,000 times the width of a string of a human hair. You can never see it. It would be invisible. But what these robots can do and can self-replicate, they can self-assemble, they can cross the blood-brain barrier, they can attach to your DNA. And he teaches his students, and he's saying this in the presentation, how to control these things once they're in the host with an Xbox controller. That is what we're dealing with now. This is basically computer programming of nanoscale technology that we are now discovering, that we know that in studies has shown that it has been in the Pfizer vaccine and the mRNA vaccine. It is also in the xylocaine derivatives. You can, in the demonstration that we sent you, you can see Dr. Ada Bachelet's nanorobots next to the xylocaine derivatives, and they're identical. You can look at what's in the studies that show what they were pulling out of the vaccines. You can see that they're identical. So the bottom line is, what can be done with this tech? If you're able to do these types of things, and what is meant to happen in the future for our society, our children to come, our genealogy, it is not a good picture if we don't stand up and say this is not okay, has never been okay, and that we've been hijacked, and this was done without our consent. Okay, so Havana syndrome is a recent term. Okay, how I first became aware of this is this happened to someone who was close to me, my son's mother. I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Hall in San Antonio, Texas, back in 2010. He was the author of a book that he had just released called Satellite Terrorism in America. Coincidentally, he wrote that book based on the same phenomenon happening to his fiance. So when I met him, he was telling me how he was meeting US citizens who were talking about hearing this strange signal that was being transmitted to them, followed by short-term, long-term memory loss, brain fog, severe headaches, vertigo, nausea, vomiting, but more specifically, electrical shocks through the torso, which is now defined as buffeting. Okay. Now, these individuals are truly being tortured and affected 365 days a year, 24/7. It is completely debilitating. And what Dr. Hall was doing was utilizing a general frequency detector, scanning people to see if they can detect anything around their person, and they were coming up positive. And I had said to him, well, isn't that enough to go to the general practitioner and get further diagnostics? He says, no. As soon as they go and they say they hear auditory symptoms, he says they are being forced institutionalized and forced medicated. And he said they're being re-victimized. And I said, well, my background as a firefighter paramedic and being involved in IRBs and studies and looking for objectivity, I said, well, there's got to be a way to take this subjective complaints and turn it into objective data. So that's when I decided to call that meeting in Sacramento, California. When 100 people showed up, I said, we have something. So I decided to start doing mass scanning in the field in conjunction with obtaining survey data to see who was most affected by this. And the data started to paint a picture. 300 people showed up at our first event in Davis, California. And what the data was showing is the persons most affected by this during that time were Caucasian females, recently single, widowed, or divorced, highly educated, then Caucasian males, in the same sequence, African Americans, Asians, and then Hispanics. And it dwindled down in ethnicity from there. And I go, is this some type of attack on Caucasians? Because we went to the Midwest and the same exact data happened, same picture. It did change when we got into Chicago, where African American and Caucasian where African Americans became number one and Caucasians were number two. And that stayed consistent to the East Coast, except for one anomaly, which was up in Virginia. I was invited by a bunch of military subcontractors who were all having these same complaints. and they found out about my work and they said, can you please come and scan us? That ultimately took me to Europe. I was invited by a government agency to test their diplomats. And for me to bring anyone who I felt sure was suffering from this phenomenon, they allowed me to use a research facility, test these individuals in a Faraday cage, anechoic chamber, which is a robust Faraday cage, and it was rated to block out frequencies between 8 kilohertz and 19 gigahertz. The frequencies we were detecting out in the field were well within that. So we used controlled people, which our frequency counters read 0 for the first time ever. So we knew we were in the right environment. When we brought in those symptomatic individuals, we were detecting frequencies. So it was at that point we conclude, for whatever reason, these frequencies are emitting from the human body. Ultimately, that led to the Bonnie Kellerby cases where they started doing surgical removals, finding these biosensors. Now, in 2016, which is far further, in the future from 2010, it was recognized, but from our diplomats and the FBI agents and CIA agents and congressional members, Colonel Agring testified that this is happening to all of them, but they're saying it only happens to federal employees. We know for a fact that this has been happening, at least we've been documented since 2010, to US citizens here in the United States. Why else would the head doctor of a 3-letter agency contact me and tell me, you and Dr. Hall kind of Renaissance men, and you're absolutely correct. There's significant overlap between the 338 federal employees that he's treating for Havana syndrome and our clients are the same. He said, the only difference is that you are surgically removing biosensors. Tell me more. Was implanting our soldiers with RFID chips the size of a large grain of rice. Into the 80s, early 80s, it became a small grain of rice. Late 80s, they were now approaching the size on a letter of a penny. Okay. That has, and you're lucky if they can be identified on any type of medical imagery, because that could surgically be removed. What we noticed is post-COVID, I started getting just inundated by calls of people saying that they're suffering from this, and there was a huge spike. So when we were scanning people back then, maybe on average 4 to 7, 4 to 8 locations, high side was 10. Now post-COVID, when we're scanning people, the average is about 20 locations that they're lining up. They're not random, they're very specific and very predictable. Back in the early 2010s, if you were incarcerated and we scanned you, we already knew you were incarcerated just by the pattern that was developing. We could superimpose all those over each other and they were identical. We can take soldiers, those who were in the military who were coming up positive. Their pattern was slightly different, but you can superimpose them over each other and they were identical. Then you can take the general population and their patterns were identical.
So just so I understand correctly, I'm sorry, you're blowing my mind here, but like you could look at those who were prisoners and they had a similar pattern. You could look at soldiers and they had a similar pattern. And you could look at the general population, the mom that goes to Trader Joe's in the afternoon, and she had a similar pattern to another mom that goes to Trader Joe's in the afternoon. Am I understanding that
Exactly.
correctly? I know I'm dumbing it down a little bit, but is that?
That is exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. And there were a couple of anomalies, but when we found an anomaly in an unusual location, they said they always had a surgical procedure. Now,
Can I jump in really quick with a question? So does
Sure.
every human give off some sort of signal, but you're just getting a certain pattern with the ones that are infected, or others give no signal whatsoever?
Back prior to COVID, it was not unusual to scan someone and they came up with no detectable signals. Just nothing. What we've discovered recently, post-COVID, everyone is coming up positive in the exact same locations that we were detecting prior to COVID of those who are symptomatic. So I had a software engineer recently who insisted that I test his 3-year-old and 6-year-old. He was so vigilant and so demanding that I do it, and he didn't tell me why. And I finally agreed after getting permission from both parents to do this. And when I scanned those 2 little children, They came up identical as the adults. I was shocked, and it was in quite frankly, I was a little upset. No, more than a little upset, I was pissed off.
Yeah, because they're using children. I mean, that's why no way in
yeah.
hell I would ever put this in my children, right? I mean,
Yeah,
no way. But a lot of people did. A lot of people were like, yeah, I want to give as many shots as I can, and many of these COVID shots and boosters and anything I can to shove into my children. It's devastating.
What this engineer did not tell me is he built a Faraday cage in his home, and he did RF testing on his children inside the Faraday cage, and they were coming up positive. And so he wanted my expertise in order to verify what his findings were. And he never told me what he did until after I did the testing. And then I understood why. And so it was then that I said, we need to continue to start testing the general population now. And I just came back from the UK from I was there for 3 weeks. We were doing some human testing on people who were non-symptomatic, but have had the jab. And what we're finding is the exact same thing. They are all lighting up now. We're not finding what we did back in the early 2010s, where it would not be unusual to find someone who came up negative. So what this is, our hypothesis now is those who are symptomatic are turned on. Those who are non-symptomatic haven't been turned on yet. And there is an article put out by Scientific Neurology, which is also in that presentation that we sent to you. And I encourage everyone to get a hold of this article. It's called Surgical Neurology International, and it was put out by Dr. Fabian Deroulet, he's PhD, and he really talks about the whole spectrum of this program. This is all the reason we think those who are symptomatic right now, those are the beta tests. And we're probably in a new form of war. The United States has this tech, the UK has this tech, Russia has this tech, China has this tech, India has this tech. Okay? Surgical Neurology International. It talks about how microwave frequencies are being utilized as a weapon of war. It talks about the 5G. China, yesterday, we just read an article, they just turned on their 6G. And in it says in the 6G, they have the ability to read and manipulate the human brain with it. Okay. This is what we're facing. If you have this nanotech in you, you are no longer considered human. There's a new term for the human species, homoborgenesis. And my question to this, if this was basically imposed upon us without consent, and you're no longer considered human, the debate is going to come at some point here, just like they gene-engineer, crops, and they patent it. Now, are you a patentable item? Are you still covered by human rights if you're no longer considered human? This is what we're facing. When Putin said that the superpower to master psychotronic weapons, how powerful a weapon can this be if you can imprint memory sets upon what I call demographical biospheres, bubbles across the United States, get them to believe one thought process versus another, divide and conquer. That is what's being implemented on us. It's important that we educate everyone so you can get in tune with your internal true self, your internal spirit, your true moral compass. You know what that is. Once you are aware of this tech and you start to get influences that are not common to yourself and you can identify that, this is part of the battle. But really what we all need to do is bind together. Because if we do not stop this now, just think about this. Before, it only took 50 years to change a generation's perspective. Now, with the advent of AI, supercomputing, quantum computing, Moore's law has been superseded. It has been broken. Instead of seven years, we're now exponentially increasing our technology. And when we're integrating AI into this, and Dr. Giordano, who is a world-leading expert on this technology, completely talks about AI being integrated with this. Elon Musk says that we're creating an AI god. There's a command and control video that we sent you. It's important that you show that to the listeners, because ultimately that is what they're trying to implement. Total control, total slavery. You don't conform. Your digital resources are cut off from you. You can't buy food, water, you can't pay bills. You can't access any monetary anything in order to buy anything because you just aren't following the system.
Best and worst snacks for your waistline. Celery with peanut butter. Celery is actually pretty good for you, but the fact that
The central command platform gives key decision makers easy access to advanced surveillance options. Using the icons at the top, we can toggle the visibility of the subjects we want to view. We'll tap the human icon to activate their visibility. This gives us a real-time view of all the subjects in our jurisdiction. Let's use the search bar to find a specific subject. Here, we can search by typing in the name of a subject or search with an image of the subject's face. First, let's try typing in the name of our subject. In this case, there were 2 people with the same name found in our jurisdiction. We can tap a subject's live location to see more details. We can now see the live location and source details of the person we tapped on, with options to see more details to help us determine if this is our subject. To search by face, let's say we have an image of the subject. We can source this from a surveillance integration or by manually uploading an image. Using face search, we can find the exact person who matches the face of our subject. Let's say our subject is suspected of committing a crime last night. We can use the AI chat to see where he was at the time of the crime. The chat will respond and show us the exact location on the map. Let's say we have a crime report that tells us the suspect fled the scene at 9:30. Let's use the timeline tool to go to exactly 9:30. We can see that it matches the report. He's leaving the bar. Let's see where he is right now by using the timeline tool to go back to live. We can use the chat to automate the next steps, such as requesting an arrest warrant and sending units to the area once we receive it. The chat will automatically create an action plan and execute the plan for you as soon as you give the approval. It'll notify the relevant parties, execute according to your department's protocol, and custom integrations with your current services, allowing you to keep your jurisdiction safe and secure right from the palm of your hand with the central command platform.
That is what they're facing, and this is why it's important that we share this.
I mean, it sounds like the Matrix, you're
Yeah.
plugged in. I mean, it's unbelievable to me. The idea that someone somewhere at a dashboard is saying, we're going to flip these individuals on right now in Memphis, Tennessee. Over here in Salt Lake City, there's a group of 100 individuals. We're going to turn those guys on today, and they're going to start to experience these symptoms. I mean, it sounds insane.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, and after hearing this, a lot of people are gonna wonder, am I infected or whatever? Like, is there a way people can know, like, themselves? Because they're gonna, like, after they see this, they're gonna be freaking out. Like, what can they do to know that they are infected?
Well, Doctor, there was a Trojan horse that was instituted upon a global society. Dr. Sherry Tenpenny recently disclosed a video where she was disclosing that in the PCR testing, that hydrogel, this graphene oxide, a lot of this nanotech was instituted in that. Not everyone took the vaccine, but I would argue that the majority of the globe was forced to take the PCR test. You were forced to take a COVID test. Otherwise, you couldn't see your children's basketball game. You couldn't, go out
Right.
and public and events. So this was forced upon all of us.
So it was in the PCR tests, not even in just the COVID.
In the hydrogel. In the hydrogel.
שימו לב, גם הבדיקות ה-PCR, מה שהוכרח, רופאים נגיד שאמרו שהם לא מעוניינים להמשיך עם החיסונים, שהם הוכחו להמשיך לעבוד, לדאוג לאוכלוסייה, הם חויבו כל כמה ימים לעשות בדיקה עם PCR שהוא חודר ופגע ברוב המקרים brain barrier, ואז הדברים שהננו חלקיקים שהחדירו, הגיעו גם למוח שגרמו את התוצאות שגרמו. מזעזע ביותר, זה נקרא רצח עם במכוון, כי זה נעשה על ידי אותם ממשלות שממשיכים לשבת, והיום הם בטוחים שדרך אפליקציה אפשר כבר לשלוט בבחירות ולבחור, כאילו להמשיך את המשחק כאילו האנשים חושבים שהם בוחרים ויש להם ממשלה, אבל אין לנו ממשלה, ומעולם לא הייתה. רק שעכשיו זה הגיע לממדים שהם כבר הזיקו 6 מיליון. אם אני מדברת עם אנשים והם לא רוצים להאמין, וחושבים שאני איזה חייזר ממקום אחר, שאני מסבירה שלא קיימת מדינת ישראל, אין לנו קרקע, כל המשרדים, לא המשטרה, המשטרה שייכת לאותם קאפו שיושבים בממשלה, כל הנציגים למיניהם, ההשתלטות על הבתי חולים, על הרופאים, בפרוטוקולים, החיוב, השינוי במצב חירום שהכניסו כל מיני חוקים. בתקופה קצרה ביבי החליט שהוא מכניס 64 חוקים, וקיבל את האפשרות גם להשתמש בחוק הנורווגי המורחב, שהוא יכול להכניס כל אידיוט שלא יבין, רק שיגיד כן למה שהוא מציע. אז כל ועדה שהם מקימים, או כל מה שמעבירים, אז ברור, יש הכל, לא צריך אפילו להגיע, לדפוק, נו, לדפוק שעון שהגעתי או הלכתי, מתי הלכתי, להראות נוכחות, אפשר דרך האפליקציה, פשוט מאוד, לתת הסכמה. אם לא תסכים, אתה לא תוכל להמשיך להיות בתאגיד שלנו, של התאגיד הבריטי המהונדס בשם ממשלת ישראל, אבל אני מזכירה לכולם שמה שהיה נקרא State of Israel, ממשלת ישראל פשטה את הרגל, כמו הרבה מדינות בשנת 2020, ולכן היו צריכים להפוך את כל האוכלוסייה, חלקם לרצוח, חלקם להפוך אותם לצורה של מעקב, כולם במעקב, בהזנה, וכל אחד צריך לדאוג ולעשות את הניקוי ואת הבדיקות האלה. למצוא היכן אפשר לעשות את הבדיקה הזאת עם המכשירים, ובפרט שלרגע ממשלת ישראל לא עצרה את המטוסים מלהיכנס ולרסס אותנו. אז כל הוועדות האלה נשלטות על ידי אותם רוצחים, זה נקרא רצח עם במפורש. ואחרי שאתה שומע את זה, ואם יש לך ילדים שנפגעו, אתה לרגע לא חושב שאתה יכול לשבת בשקט, אבל אני רואה שכל אלה שבחרו, וגם עיתונאים וגם כל מיני מפורסמים במערכת של המדיה, שלקחו את החיסונים, הם פשוט בשליטה, הם מעבירים חומר בלי לדעת, המון שחקנים, המון, הם בשליטה מוחלטת, ובלי ידיעתם נתנו הסכמה. אם הלכו לרופא שיניים או לא משנה איפה. זוהי המלחמה השקטה, זו מלחמת עולם שלישית, כאשר הכחדת האנושות היא מספר אחד שנעשה כבר במהלך מ-2015, כשזה יצא. כשהתוכנית יצאה לפועל, יש לי ממש פירוט מדויק פה מאוסטרליה בתחילת הקורונה, וגם מי האנשים שביצעו והלכו למדינות, וכמובן דאגו להביא את כל האינפורמציה, זה היה סיור שלם של אותם אנשים, ומביאים את האינפורמציה ישר לאנגליה, וכמובן גם לארצות הברית, לשני המקומות שהם בשליטה פרטית של אותם בנקאים וסוחרים שביצעו את מלחמת עולם ראשונה ושנייה באותה מטרה למטרות שלהם.
Hydrogel, yeah. Not in addition, what they're finding in the vaccines, there's no hiding that, and they're finding in this anesthetic derivative xylocaine. So anytime you've been numbed or go to a dentist, that you cannot get a xylocaine derivative or lidocaine derivative right now that does not have the nanotech in it.
So even just going to get a simple blood test right now, just having them numb the area before a blood test, you could be receiving these nanoparticles?
Absolutely. 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 So I'm working with a very talented group of people, just like Ido Bachelet teaches his students how to program these things. We believe if we're able to establish the protocol that they're utilizing, that we can come up with a solution, basically a cure to make these things inert. But it's going to be a back and forth battle. You know, once you find out a way to stop it, then they're going to find a way to reintegrate it again. And this is going to be a consistency that we foresee in the near and far future. Right now, the best thing that can be done, like I said, I've never stood behind anything until recently. The Zeolite Z product that is out there, that's basically all natural Mother Earth. It's a negatively charged mineral. It's created when you have volcanic activity in sea and in blue zones. That's the best place to get it, and they source it from. But what we're finding is that those who are symptomatic, like I said, both in intelligence agencies and the victims that I normally see, are saying 50 to 70% reduction in their symptoms. And they've done testing, blood testing at initial levels of control, seen the graphene oxide peak after taking it, which is what you expected because it's being excreted out of your body. And then after 90 days, it levels down to at least a minimal tolerable level. Right now, it's a Band-Aid, but it is some type of solution to help. What we are finding in the general population of the non-symptomatic people, those who are coming up positive in the least locations, 3 or 4, which is something that I rarely see now, are those who live outside of cities, suburbs, in very distant locations, live a very organic life, haven't had the vaccine, just live a completely healthy lifestyle. For whatever reason, those are the ones who are coming up positive in the least locations. We're currently working on trying to find cultural groups who are very isolated, like the Amish, and we're working on trying to start testing them to see, because you asked, how's it get in you? The larger tech was with an injection or some type of medical procedure. With the nanotech, we know that an injection is a modality for it to be in you, but it's also in our foods. It's being marketed in the cosmetics as the next greatest way of marketing things. And we still haven't figured out why those who live out in distant remote areas are still coming up positive in at least 3 or 4 locations. That would mean it's either in our water, bombarded. So at least with the Zeolite Z, it at least keeps it down to a minimal level where you minimize, and it excretes the graphene oxide as well as other toxic metals. But graphene oxide specifically amplifies RF signals, okay? Basically, our health systems have been weaponized against us. That is what's happened now. And each and every human being who has this in them, this nanotech, is a node. You are connected to the internet. Each and every one of us is a transmitter and a receiver. Now, remember, again, when you read that New World Vistas report on page 89, and even go further to the other report that talks about than being able to remotely read your thoughts back in 1972. This system will have the ability to do that on a mass scale once the 6G is turned on.
High IQ brains are the most dopamine addicted. Here's why that ruins everything. You watch.
Jeez. So, I guess it's hard to maybe answer the question, but who's behind this?
Okay. What we can say is the frequencies that we are detecting almost always go back to a group of military subcontractors and telecommunications companies. All of them are fighting for this neurotechnology. The BRAIN initiative that was instituted by President Obama was not a mistake. This was all construed done on purpose. In 2011, I was at the Presidential Bioethics Commission under Amy Gutmann, who was appointed by President Obama, who is now the ambassador to Germany at the UN. I was there with my assistant, and this was broadcasted worldwide. And they were talking about wanting to map every living organism's genome, including humans, back then. And I was allowed to ask a question, and my assistant wrote this down, and she can bear witness to this. They took a break, and my question was going to be asked next. And my question was this: I understand the importance of your experimentation, but what safeguards have you put aside for when your experimentation goes wrong? Because I already knew what was happening. We have been tracking this phenomenon early on, and I was asked to go attend that meeting. And what they did was ripped up my question. And Amy Gutmann in that meeting said this, that they are the top elite 1% of the top 1% that should decide on health decisions and what should be done to our bodies, that we are too dumb to make good decisions for ourselves. That's the mentality that we're dealing with at the upper echelons, those that are in control.
I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not much of a limb, but this is one of the most mind-blowing, disturbing.
Documentary is a nonlinear junction detector. These things are highly sensitive, very expensive. This piece of equipment here is around 22,000 US dollars. And what it was designed to do is to find rust initially in airplanes. And what they found serendipitously is that it will also locate circuitry or semiconductor material, silicon-based, which is basically in all circuitry, down to very, very minute sizes. And what we were doing is doing RF scanning around those victims who were symptomatic initially, and then coming with a nonlinear junction detection, because we felt our hypothesis was those who were suffering from the Havana syndrome or anomalous health incidences is the new acronym, that there was something unique within that person that was allowing them to receive these signals. And what the nonlinear junction detection was detecting is positive results for semiconductor materials or semiconductors in these people, which ultimately led to surgical removal of biosensors. One of my earliest cases is the Bonnie Kellerby case.
This man and this woman here are now my family. And
אוקיי. בוא נראה אם יש פה עוד משהו.
Have you ever seen a product that transforms any ordinary space into a dreamy underwater world in just 1 second? Meet the Kamau Immersive Ocean Projector, the mood light that's taking the market by storm.
Society and global society.
COVID is critical because this is what convinces people to accept, to legitimize.
Upload complete.
Total biometric surveillance.
It's always the data. It's the crack cocaine of Silicon Valley. We are already...
אתם ראיתם? זה ישראלי שעבד עם World Economic Forum, שאמר שאנחנו בא לתל אביב וכולם קיבלו אותו שמה. Human hackables, you are now human hackables. כולם הריעו לו שם ושמעו אותו, אחד שעבד עם אותה קבוצה של הבן של הרייך השלישי, עכשיו מוביל את הרייך הרביעי. כן, זה דבר מזעזע שבישראל, גם נתנו לבורלה $1,000,000 או שקל, זה כבר לא משנה, זה לא מעניין, זה כל הכסף הזה הוא מרמה אחת גדולה. כאשר הציגו אותו, שהוא הציל את 6 מיליון שחוסנו, שהוא דאג להם לחיסונים. אז אלה החיסונים שדאגו להכניס לכלל האוכלוסייה, כאשר להזכיר לכם, ועדת הלסינקי התפטרה משום הסיבה שלא הסכימה לקבל את האחריות של ניסוי כזה, כאשר כתוב במפורש שלעשות ניסוי, לתת ניסוי או בחומר חדש, במיוחד שזה טכנולוגיה חדשה, הם צריכים לקחת 30 איש שהתנדבו, יסכימו, ולראות את התוצאות, וזה לא בוצע בישראל. פייזר היא צריכה להיהרס טוטלית, כיוון שהיא שותפה לרצח עם. אז פייזר ישראל, שחתמה את ההסכם המושחר, ויכולנו לראות את זה, זה התגלה בתחילת הדרך, בדיוק חוזה שנחתם נדמה לי בדרום אפריקה, לא בדרום אפריקה, דרום אמריקה, שזה 1:1, שזה חוזה של חבורה מסונפת, והשניים שחתמו זה היה אלרועי פרייס ואדון ביבי נתניהו על החוזה המושחר, והם אחראים גם אם הם לא רוצים להיות אחראים, אבל הם ישבו במעמד כזה שלקחו החלטה לתת דבר שהם ידעו במפורש מהו, ואסור לאף אחד להמשיך להתנהל רגיל. יש צורך לסגור את המדינה לחלוטין, לחסל את נושא של הכנסת, הוא לא שלנו. הכל לא שלנו. הם עכשיו מרכזים את האנשים לתוך ערים צפופות שכבר לא יהיה לכם שליטה, יפעילו במכה את הכל, כולם יפלו כמו את ה-6G. אני שוב אומרת, מי שיש לו קרובים לתת, לנסות להעביר כמה שיותר, לנקות, לעשות את הבדיקות האלה, לנקות את הדברים האלה מהגוף, לדאוג למזון וכל דבר. נכון שיש ריסוסים ולכן צריך כל מחוסן לקחת באופן קבוע את המוצרים, זה לאו דווקא רק מה שהוא אמר, יש דברים מסוימים שדיבר עליהם דוקטור מקלאו, 3 חומרים שלפחות שנה ראשונה כדי להוציא את אותם מתכות שהם היחידים שמוציאים את המתכות, חשוב מאוד לפעול בעניין. זה בערך פחות או יותר הווידאו שאני מסיימת אותו.
Living inside the architecture of totalitarianism.
We need not just to monitor people, we need to monitor what's happening under the skin.
I know my husband is not vaccinating people, putting a microchip in their arm, because that technology doesn't even exist and he's never uttered the words out of his mouth, so.
לראות המבט השטני, את הרוע. מי שמבין ויודע לקרוא תווי פנים רואה שזה לא אנושי. האדם הזה לא אנושי. זה אדם.
Microchips and tracking devices are embedded in the vaccine. Is this accurate?
We have 6 MAC addresses that are pulsing Bluetooth signals, and all we are is surrounded by tombstones. So can someone explain to me why we're getting EMF emissions off grade inside of a Faraday cage, please?
So we've seen the reports of individuals having unlicensed MAC addresses.
אוקיי, אני מסיימת. יש אפשרות לבדוק את זה. כל אחד יש אפליקציה כזאת. בישראל מומחים לכל נושא הטכנולוגיה. באפליקציות אתם יכולים ללכת לבד לבתי הקברות, ועל ידי הבלוטוס עם האפליקציה המסוימת. הם אומרים שזה כתובות של מאק. ומי הקים את כל הנושא הזה? המלוכה הבריטית שיש להם פטנט מיוחד. אתם לכן כבר בבעלות, כל מי שממשיך עם הנושא הזה ולא מנסה לעשות תיקון בכמה שלבים, הוא כבר נחשב בבעלות של יצרן הפטנט, בשליטה מוחלטת. אז יום טוב לכולם. חדשות שמזעזעות.